Go.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about our technical subject areas. And one part of our technical subject areas will be our National Airspace System. And our National Airspace System is basically all of the airspaces we have that govern around the United States of America. What types of airspaces are controlled, what types of airspaces are uncontrolled, and what are the requirements and abilities that we can do within these airspaces. So first things first, we're going to talk about what is controlled and uncontrolled. So some of our controlled airspaces would be Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. These are airspaces that are usually controlled, and some of them have airports governing around them, while some of them are just covered areas for air traffic control. And then our single only uncontrolled airspace is Gulf airspace. So now what do these do? The Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo, these all provide ATC radar coverage. Spell that wrong. Gulf, however, does not provide radar coverage. Okay, so now after talking about our airspaces, what is controlled and uncontrolled, let's go ahead and go over the types of airspaces. So the first thing we got is we're going to go over the airports that go around the area. We're going to skip Alpha for right now, and we're going to go to Bravo airspace. So first things first, we got our Bravo airspaces. We're going to be talking about the dimensions, the equipment requirements, the rules, and the pilot requirements of this airspace and all of the next airspaces as well. So the first things first for a Bravo airspace is we're going to be talking about our dimensions. The dimensions of the Bravo airspace is 30 nautical miles radius around the airport, and it goes from the surface of the ground all the way up to 10,000 feet. And a lot of times our Bravo airspaces, they look like upside down wedding cakes. Kind of just look like this. So it gives people more clearance for anyone living inside the Bravo or underneath to be able to take off and fly around the Bravo without breaching the airspace. So they don't have to be talking to air traffic control. And however, it also provides better for airliners taking off and coming in, for them to take off from the airport and constantly be climbing out through the Bravo, having constant air traffic control coverage while leaving the airspace. Next thing we're going to be talking about is our equipment. Now, for some of our equipment, we're going to be needing a Mode C transponder, because a Mode C transponder circles around the outside of the Bravo airspace. We have a Mode C transponder and two-way radio communications. Because the two-way radio communications are required to keep constant contact within air traffic control while we are within the airspace. However, one good thing to note is before we can even enter this airspace, we must be cleared to enter. So whenever you make your call out, you're going to call out your tail number, your call sign, and you can't hear your call sign be responded, because sometimes they may say your call sign and say stand by. You must hear the words cleared to enter. Some also of our rules after equipment. Our rules are going to be, of course, maintaining your comms, and again, must be cleared to enter. Now we're going to be talking about our pilot requirements. What type of requirements do you need as a pilot to be able to enter and fly through this airspace? And surprisingly, being such a big airport, it's with such mass congestiveness around this airspace, it's really minimal on the requirements that you're going to need. So to be able to land and take off in a civil aircraft within this airspace at this Bravo airport, you need to be at least private pilot licensed, private pilot rated, to be able to take off and land with a civil aircraft. However, if you're just going to be flying through the Bravo and you're not going to be actually landing at that airport, you can be student pilot rated as long as you have the proper endorsements from your flight instructor. Then you can allow to fly through the Bravo, and of course, if you feel comfortable with doing it, talking to such fast rated air traffic controllers. So going over all of that, let's see if there is everything else. We got 30 nautical miles, surface of 10,000. And one good thing to report too is part of our equipment is we are also going to need our automatic altitude reporting equipment. Kind of like our ADSB, so air traffic control can always figure out where we are, our altitudes that we're at. And another good thing to note too is that while we're within our airspace, we also have our airspeeds limitations. Good thing about our airspeeds is while we're within the airspace of the Bravo, we can go no faster than 250 knots. That is a requirement mainly used for separation and for safety of the aircraft. However, when we are below the Bravo airspace, or even flying through the little corridor of the Bravo airspace, we can only go no more than 200 knots. So now that we got our whole Bravo airspace talking about, now we gotta go to Charlie. So Bravo's done, let's go through Charlie airspace. We're gonna do it right over here. So now let's gonna talk about Charlie airspace. Charlie airspace is about the same as Bravo. It's the same thing, you have airliners flying out, regional jets flying in and out of the airspace. It is pretty congested, but it's not as big. One of the main differences from Charlie and a Bravo airspace is the dimensions of a Charlie airspace. Now, some of the dimensions of the Charlie airspace is instead of it being a whole 30 nautical miles, it is still going to look like an upside down wedding cake. But in this case, it is about half the size of a Bravo. So for the first part, we got, for the first part of the little upside down wedding cake, it is 5 nautical miles from the surface all the way up to 4,000 feet. And then the next section of the wedding cake is going to be another 10 nautical miles. This time all the way up from 1,200 feet to the very tops of 4,000 feet, because Charlie airspaces usually top out around 4,000 feet according to our at ground level, and we also still need to include the mean sea level. So now now requiring the dimensions of the Charlie airspace, now we gotta need our equipment. Now the equipment is about the same as the Bravo airspace. We are gonna need our Mode C transponder and again, two-way radio communications. Two-way radio. Okay, so the next thing after that is our rules of the Charlie airspace. Now some of the rules, there really aren't that big rules, but one of the clearest ones is for a Bravo airspace, you need to be cleared to enter. For a Charlie airspace, you do not need to hear the words cleared to enter. All you need to hear is your call sign. So when you call out, and if they say they respond with your call sign and then they say stand by, because they're very busy and they still have other aircraft to tend to. They recognized you, they said your call sign, there hereby you are cleared to enter the airspace. Okay, so then after we got that for those rules, now we just got to be hearing our pilot requirements. And so for our pilot requirements, these are pretty simple, and for this part here on out, for the next Delta and Echo airspaces, all you really need to be is a student pilot. You need to have a student pilot with you. You can even fly solo through most of these if you have the proper endorsements and flight requirements. Now after going through everything for our Charlie airspace, also wanted to note that for a Charlie airspace, you can go no more than 200 knots. 200 knots within this airspace is the maximum allowed airspeed. After going through our Charlie airspace and our Bravo airspace, now we're going to go over our Delta airspaces. Alright, so now going over Delta, that's kind of like the area that we currently do most of our flight training around here. Delta airspace is recognized on a sectional chart as dashed blue lines, and the dimensions of the Delta airspace is usually around the surface to 2,500 feet AGL above the ground, and it usually has a radius of around 4 nautical miles. So now we're going to be talking about our equipment for a Delta Airspace. It's going to be the same thing. You're all you're really going to need is you're going to need your two-way radio communications, and now for also thing for your Charlie Airspace is you're going to for your pilot requirements. Pilot requirements, same thing, student pilot. And then last but not least, we have our rules. Same thing as a Charlie Airspace. You must be able to hear your call sign to be able to enter the airspace when the Delta tower is activated. One difference about a Delta versus a Charlie and Bravo are usually active 24/7, whereas a Delta usually changes from Delta to an Echo Airspace whenever the tower closes, because they usually have closing times, kind of like a fast food restaurant. Also, you must be alert of the tower's intentions. And also, for a Delta as well, your maximum airspeed is 200 knots. Now after going over this, we got Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Last but not least, we have our Echo and Alpha airspaces. So we're gonna go over our Echo airspaces right here. Echo is really different. It really doesn't really mention an actual airport such as these three. It's usually for areas where air traffic control has radar coverage over certain aircraft traveling long distances or just traveling through an area. It's something for general aviation, what we call flight following. When it comes to the Echo airspaces, it extends up to, but it does not include 18,000 mean sea level. Because once you hit 18,000 feet, that's when it turns into Alpha airspace, which we will get to in a minute. Not included. Okay, so another thing about our Echo airspace is that you also goes from the surface up to 18,000, wherever there is no more Gulf airspace and uncontrolled underneath. And then from 18,000 all the way up to 60,000 feet, that is Alpha airspace. So let's quickly go over Alpha right now before I continue with Echo. Alpha airspace is where everything is IFR required. You cannot be on a VFR flight plan of above 18,000 feet, and you must have constant communications and two-way radio communications with air traffic control. So for Alpha airspace is usually around 18,000 feet all the way up to 60,000 feet. And usually the only aircraft that can go above 60,000 feet are like an SR-71. And that's where it turns back into Echo because of that reason. So the Echo extends up to and not including 18,000 mean sea level, and then it continues up basically to space from 60,000 feet. Some other things about our Echo airspace is that our sectionals depict Echo below 14,500, and when it is not depicted on our sectional charts, our Echo starts at 14,500 feet. Some of our equipment for Echo is, of course, you need our two-way radio communications, and for our pilot requirements, you are going to need also student pilot requirements. And for some of our rules, there's really not that many rules. You can fly by yourself. You don't really have to be talking to anyone within an Echo. It's just here to let you know that you have radar coverage and you can request flight following. You can do file flight plans in Echo airspace. So now we have gone over our Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and now our Echo airspaces. Alpha airspace is IFR only, 18,000 to 60,000 feet. So now, last but not least, we have our Gulf airspace. This is the one where it gets kind of weird. Gulf airspace. This is the uncontrolled airspace. So some of our dimensions of our Gulf airspace is that it extends from the surface to the base of our Echo airspace. Wherever there is Echo. So after it extends from the surface to our Echo airspace, usually it begins either around 700 feet or it begins around 1,200 feet AGL. Some of our equipment for Gulf is, of course, it's uncontrolled airspace. So you don't need really any equipment since you're not going to be talking to anyone in the first place, and there is no radar coverage over that area. Of course, as a pilot requirements, you just need to be, again, student pilot rated. And some of the rules, again, Gulf, uncontrolled, there really are no rules. As long as be a safe pilot, you don't really need to talk to anyone. So now after going over all of this section, I'm going to clear out some room. And we covered everything, all the airspaces, what's controlled and uncontrolled. Now we're going to be going over our VFR weather minimums. So now going over VFR weather minimums, usually the best way to explain it is in a diagram to explain the complexities of it, all the different altitudes, and the distances from clouds that you need to do to be able to legally be in these areas without going IFR at least. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start drawing this diagram out. This right here section is going to be 10,000 feet and above, and this right here is going to be 18,000 feet. And then we're also going to have split this section off and this section as well. This right here is going to be our 1,200 foot AGL altitude, and we're basically it's going to be like our same thing, controlled and uncontrolled airspaces. So we got our controlled right here, and then we got uncontrolled on this section. Which is, again, our Gulf airspace. This section right here would be our Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo airspaces. Now, one thing about Bravo is a little separate. We're gonna take that section off from Bravo, and we're gonna consider mainly focused on Charlie, Delta, and Echo airspaces at this point of time. So some part for our basic VFR weather minimums for controlled airspace of Charlie, Delta, and Echo is, we're gonna draw a little tiny cloud here, and we're gonna think of this key word, 3152. It's a 4-digit code. Best way to think of it is how your distances from your clouds. So you're gonna have to be at least 1,000 feet above your cloud, 500 feet below the cloud, and 2,000 feet horizontal from your cloud. The 3, however, comes from your visibility requirements. How far can you see outside the aircraft? How determined is it? How best can you see your surroundings around you? So this would be your visibility requirements, which is 3 statute miles, not nautical miles, statute miles. Going over that, now we're going to go back to our Bravo real quick before we forget about it. And our Bravo airspace is slightly different because it is very, very congested. There's a lot of traffic around the area, so you need a lot of air traffic control watching over you to be able to push in and squeeze in so much aircraft around in that one single area. So basically Bravo is very simple. All it really is you need to have your visibility of at least 3 statute miles, and all you need to do is be clear of clouds. So basically just don't let your wingtip touch a cloud. Moving on now, we're gonna have our uncontrolled airspaces. This section right here is gonna be day, and this section right here is gonna be night. And then right down here below 1,200 feet is also uncontrolled airspace, daytime, below 1,200 feet, since it's slightly different. Coming to our uncontrolled airspaces for daytime, it is gonna be, instead of it being 3152, it's gonna be 1152. So same thing, we're gonna draw a little tiny poofy cloud here. It's gonna be 1,000 above, 500 below, 500, and 2,000 horizontal. Now this time, since it's daytime and it's uncontrolled Gulf airspace being so low in altitude, we're really only gonna need 1 statute mile of visibility. Coming to 1,200 feet, below 1,200 feet for uncontrolled Gulf airspace, all it's gonna be is, again, same thing as our Bravo airspace, except the statute miles are gonna be a lot lower. So our visibility for daytime and Gulf airspace is 1 statute mile and clear of clouds. Now we're going to be going back up to our section, but above 1,200 feet AGL, below 10,000 feet MSL is our uncontrolled Gulf airspace at nighttime. So this is basically going to be The same thing is going to be as our Charlie Delta and Echo. It's going to be 3152. So keyword 3152. We're going to draw a tiny little cloud here, and it's going to be 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet horizontal. Next things after that is we're going to be talking about our visibility, which again is going to be visibility of 3 statute miles. Because at nighttime, you're going to need a little bit more distance in between to be able to detect another aircraft if you're on an apparent head-on collision or an aircraft coming from into your direction. You're going to want to see an aircraft quick enough before crashes or accidents occur. So now that we got all this done, figured out, below our 10,000 feet, we got our controlled airspace at Charlie Delta and Echo, and our uncontrolled airspaces. Now we're going to talk about this section, which is above 10,000 feet MSL, but however below 18,000 feet. Because above 18,000 feet is our alpha airspace, which is where it is IFR only. Only. No VFR. So there's no VFR minimums. Everything is minimums for IFR for instrument flight rules. So back to here for above 10,000 feet, below 18,000 feet, it's pretty simple. It's basically just going to be 5111 for the key word. 5111. So we're going to draw a little tiny cloud here, and it's going to be 1,000 feet above, 1,000 feet below, and instead of it being 2,000 feet horizontal, it's going to be 1 statute mile horizontal from your cloud. Now for this time, as you've been noticing, all of our visibilities have been around 3 statute miles, and the lower your altitude, 1 statute miles. However, for up here, up at above 10,000 feet, it is 5 statute miles. Because up at higher altitudes, we will be having aircraft that will be flying much faster, much bigger aircraft, and it takes a lot less time to be able to recognize that you're on a collision course or that an accident may occur. So to counteract that, you want to have a much further statute mile distance of visibility so you can see an aircraft coming toward you, and you can have a lot more time to avoid that accident and turn away. So going over our VFR weather minimums, we got above 18,000 feet, above 10,000 feet, below 18,000, 5111. Below 10,000 feet for controlled airspace at Charlie Delta and Echo is 3152, 3 statute miles. For Bravo controlled airspace, it is 3 statute miles from clear clouds. And then for below 10,000 feet, but above 1,200 feet AGL, we have our 2 uncontrolled airspaces of Gulf Day and Gulf Night, which would be 1152 for day and 3152, same as Charlie Delta Echo, for night. And then below 1,200 feet AGL for uncontrolled Gulf during the daytime is 1 statute mile and clear of clouds. So now after we've gone over all the airspaces, what the airspaces are, and our VFR weather minimums, we only have one more section left. And that's going to be recovering all of our other types of airspaces. And so now that's going to be talking about our special use airspaces and our TFRs, which is a big, big part. So we got multiple types of special use airspaces. Some types of special use airspaces we're going to be talking about is our prohibited areas, restricted areas, warning areas, military operation areas, otherwise known as MOAs, and alert areas. And then we also have something known as CFAs, controlled firing areas. A TFR, however, is separate from these special use airspaces. So first thing we're going to talk about is our prohibited areas. Now, a lot of these areas are pretty self-explanatory. The key word is within the title of the area, prohibited. It is prohibited to enter the airspace. You have to have certain requirements and availability to be able to enter these airspaces. So again, flight within the area of the prohibited area is prohibited. Some examples would be Camp David, the national malls around Washington, D.C., where the White House and your congressional buildings are located. Now we're going to be talking about our restricted areas. It's slightly different from prohibited, but there are a little bit of different areas with it, our restricted areas. Restricted basically just means that the operations within this area and within this airspace, special use airspace, is hazardous to non-participating aircraft. Again, hazard to our non-participating aircraft. Besides that, it is not wholly prohibited, so you can still enter this airspace. However, but it is subject to restrictions, and usually you need to have clearance to be able to enter within this airspace. Because it is subject to your restrictions, it depicts areas of unusual or invisible activity. So usually restricted areas include stuff like artillery firing, aerial gunnery, or guided missiles. Something that you really can't see when you're flying an airplane since it's on the ground and it's so tiny. Artillery, missiles, and gunnery. So now that talking about all that, when we go to look at our sectionals trying to find a restricted airspace so we know if we can go through it or we can see if we can chart our way around it when we're making a flight plan. On our sectionals, it is charted within big R and a series of numbers. So when you find one on your sectional, it's going to look like a big R with a dash like 1442. So you can find the exact type of restricted area on the back of your sectional and see why it is there and what they are doing in that area. Another section of our special use airspace would be our warning areas. Now again, keyword, warning. We got our warning areas, and a warning area is basically similar in nature to our restricted areas. However, the U.S. government really does not have sole jurisdiction over this airspace because it's expressed as an area of defined dimensions extending 3 nautical miles outside from around the coast of the United States. And the purpose of these warning areas is to always warn your non-participating aircraft of potential danger. So it's not restricted, it's just a warning area. They're there to warn you of danger. And that's why it extends out around the United States by 3 nautical miles, right around the area of the continuous ADIS. The next part about our warning areas is going to be our military, which is really cool, by the way. We're going to be talking about our military operations area, otherwise known as MOAs. Military operation areas. So within these military operation areas, they're usually defined by vertical and lateral limits. And these areas usually always have times from when they're active or when they're not active, and you can always find these on your sectional and find the exact labeling of the MOA you're going to be planning to fly through and find where it's going to be when it's active and what they're doing within that MOA. So some things about the MOAs is that it was established to separate military traffic from IFR traffic. That was its whole point. Military from IFR. They want to separate community traffic, like the airlines, from military and fighter jets. One thing about MOAs, though, is that you can enter a MOA. You can have requested airspace to fly through it, but you might want to be careful because sometimes the fighter jets, if they are active, will like to play chicken with you in your tiny little small plane. It's not too fun, but very exhilarating. So the whole point of the MOA there is it's for your non-participating IFR traffic. You may be cleared through when the area is active, but only if IFR separation is maintained. If your IFR separation cannot be maintained from the military or other aircraft, then you will be rerouted around the military operations area, which usually happens more or less at the time thanks to air traffic control. So we've gone over prohibited areas, restricted areas, warning areas, and our MOAs. Next but not least, we have our alert areas. Now again, pretty easy keyword. It's an alert. Kind of like a warning area, but just a little different. Something about our alert areas is that it is depicted on charts with an A followed by a number. Kind of like A-111. something like that. It's used to inform and alert your non-participating aircraft of high volume of pilot training. That's basically what it is. Kind of like we have an alert area here for our super decathlon and for our high aerobatic training. So it's used to alert non-participating aircraft or pilots of high training areas and high congestion areas. Something about these high congestion areas is that it can either be used for that or unusual type of aerial activity, kind of like aerobatics. All pilots are responsible for collision avoidance. Within this area, you have a whole bunch of unknown areas going on. You can have aerobatics, you can have skydiving, you can have anything like that. And so that's why when it comes to alert areas, the pilot is responsible. If any collision happens, it's not air traffic control. You're left alone at that point. It is up to you to be safe and be a responsible pilot. So now last but not least, we have one more of our special use airspaces and our TFRs. So one thing about our special use airspace is we have our controlled firing areas. It is CFA, not Chick-fil-A, controlled firing area. A controlled firing area mainly contains activities that, if not conducted in a controlled environment, it could be hazardous to non-participating aircraft, such as when it's not charted on your sectional, because all activities must be suspended when a spotter aircraft, radar, or ground-based finds an aircraft and approaching the area. So again, controlled firing area, not on sectional. You won't be able to find it on there. And it's basically for stuff on the ground, kind of like shooting, guns, activity that could be damaging to aircraft in the area. So because it's not on a sectional, it is up to the people on the ground to discover the plane. They will usually have spotters, or they will have a spotter aircraft, or people looking out for planes. And if there's an aircraft that is discovered that is about to fly over that area while it is active, all of those activities will be suspended until that aircraft is a safe distance away. And last but not least, we're going to be covering our TFRs. This is usually the most important, because this, you will always find a big red circle in that area on ForeFlight or your sectional for a TFR, because usually that means, like an example, the president is in town. And TFR stands for a temporary flight restriction. Temporary flight restrictions, it's always temporary, but it's there, means you cannot fly in it whatsoever unless you have very specific clearance to be able to get in, or you're flying for, like, let's say the airlines, you got to go in and get and land in that airport. You got to have the clearance for it. Some parts about our temporary flight restrictions is that we have our FDC NOTAMs. That's where you can discover it on there. It's your FDC NOTAMs, and it's issued to designate a TFR. So, FDC NOTAMs, in which the NOTAMs is basically there to alert you of any new or changing updates of the aircraft, the area, or the airport. It's always important to check your NOTAMs before your flight, because a TFR may pop up, and if you don't check your NOTAMs, this one may pop up out of nowhere during your flight plan, and you may get in a lot of trouble, not only with air traffic control, but with the government or the company that is controlling this temporary flight restriction. Another part of our temporary flight restrictions is that it is followed by, it's an effective time period, and it's an area in statute miles altitude. So of course we have our temporary flight restrictions. You have certain altitudes, where is this set out either to the surface all the way up to a certain specified altitude. It's always a specified time with that temporary flight restrictions, usually from a whole day, maybe a week, maybe even a month. But it's always important to check it. So talking about all this, we have gone over our temporary flight restrictions. We have gone over our special use airspaces for prohibited areas, restricted areas, warning areas, MOAs, military operation areas, alert areas, CFAs, controlled firing areas. We have also gone over our VFR weather minimums for above 18,000 feet, 18 to 10,000, controlled airspaces below 10,000, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Bravo, and uncontrolled airspaces such as Gulf for day and night 10,000, 1,200, and below 1,200 feet AGL. And last but not least, we have also talked about each of our airspaces. What is controlled? What is uncontrolled? What do they mean? What gives us allowed ability to fly into these airspaces for our dimensions, equipment, rules, and our pilot requirements, and our airspeeds to be allowed to fly and not get in trouble with the airspace. And this whole point of this for our National Airspace System is to show you how intricate this is, how important it is, and how awesome it is, because you have to be a safe and efficient pilot. So please study this, please understand this, and if you would like, I would love to go over it again and explain as much as I possibly can.